How has COVID changed the remote working landscape? So we're about 3 years into the pandemic. That was late 2019, early 2020. So we're about a year beyond we're sort of the return to normal, back to as far as working goes. We've kind of been had a year to kind of see the effects out of it. And remote working is nothing new. Remote work's been around for a long time. Companies connecting in or having salespeople on the road. That's nothing new. What was an interesting statistic that came out of it was that if asked, roughly about 50% of workers said that if they can work from home and their job allows it, they would prefer to keep working from home. And kind of the real interesting part of that is, well, what does that have effect? Because that not only affects hiring in a sense that you're over half the applicants are could potentially work from home, but your technology design now has to meet your business needs, not just technology. I'm hiring people that could be out of state, not come in the office, or they could be local, they just don't come into the office. So you've got to had this traditional perimeter network where you had an office, a rack and stack, all this stuff that was in there, your switching, your computers, the office, the wires. And that was all protected by a firewall or some security appliances that you come into that network and protect it that way. So and remote access to that network isn't new either. People would use VPNs, remote gateways, web server portals into those environments. That's nothing new, but you're usually coming into the secure perimeter to kind of do that. um, Data workloads have really been moving in the cloud and kind of SaaS applications. That's not new either. The pandemic didn't really affect that as far as it being developed, but it really accelerated it because we were essentially forced to have to put some of those workloads to allow these remote workers to access that stuff. So 365, Google Workspace, Amazon, Azure, Salesforce, NetSuite, all these things are now pushed out into the cloud, and we were given remote access or users access to that so they can reach it. That has really kind of sped up really fast as far as SaaS and cloud adoption. So it's really seen acceleration in that. And again, that's nothing new, but the amount of people and workers and workloads being up in that environment now has sort of introduced security as the real challenge for that. When you were sitting behind that perimeter, that traditional firewall, you had a lot of control over everything. You had the network secure access. You can only access it through X, Y, and Z. Now that people are working remotely, you have a lot less control over that as far as what networks they're connecting to, what, to some level computers, if you're allowing bring your own device, and then workloads where you're actually storing that information in the cloud, if that's a SaaS solution, if it's a cloud hosted server. So we've seen a kind of traditional perimeter it's still there, it still will probably always be there, but you really have a change in where small medium businesses really have to kind of focus on two main security aspects when you've got this remote workforce, and that's securing your endpoints. Those are computers and any device that essentially accesses this data. So you got computers and then the networks they're actually using. So if I'm working from home, I've got my home network that is potentially could be unsecure. You kind of can't trust it. It could be a coffee shop, it could be a branch office, it could be a lot of things, but you essentially have to default down to this network is not secure, and so we need to treat the computer as if it's on an unsecure network. So you're implementing things like endpoint detection and response, kind of upgraded antivirus in a way. You got endpoint content filtering for secure web browsing, and then identity control and policy control to make sure that these remote workstations can get security policies are being patched when they're not connecting into a central point. Their password complexities are being updated. All this security stuff to make sure that you're getting all your endpoints with the same policy and consistency. You're thinking like kind of mobile device management in a way, Jamf, AirWatch, Endpoint Manager. So you've got that type of security for your endpoints, but then you also have to secure your workloads. So that's where your data and your collaboration is all held. You're thinking Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Salesforce, Ignite, all these kind of places where all your real data is held. And you want to make sure that those are, the policies as far as accessing that data is all secure. So you've got multi-factor, you've got usernames, making sure that the password complexities are turned on for those kind of environments, as well as if they're able to do conditional access to only allow certain connections in, and also doing single sign-on, so you don't have too many different usernames and too many different passwords. So you're trying to look at implementing kind of a single identity control by integrating them in with Azure Web, Azure Web Services or 365 and Azure Active Directory. So you've got these workloads out there, and then also monitoring and auditing those. Those aren't really like Windows Server logs that all get generated. Each one has its own logging and its own monitoring and notifications. So you're looking at real advanced SIM and SOC solutions, incident monitoring, security operations centers to get alerts on all these. So you've got, 365 that does it, but then I've got Salesforce, and you've got all these other different types of workloads that you need to kind of monitor, and they're all a little bit independent of one another. Um, and then that kind of leads into your kind of compliance, where normally compliance behind that perimeter was, well, if you're in the firewall, you're all covered by the compliance network, you're all in scope. But now if I'm separating my workloads out, now I've got to make sure that 365 is compliant. I've got to make sure that this Ignite solution is compliant, or our custom web developer that's hosted up in Azure is or our web services is all compliant as well, because it kind of spreads that scope out a little bit and making sure that you're isolating that data to fall within compliance. If you're thinking CMMC or ISO or anything like PCI compliance, anything like that. So you've got a little bit, your workloads are scattered a little bit more, as far as the pandemic has taken that central location and kind of spread it out a little bit more. So kind of the real takeaway is that it's become a lot. Expect half the users to come in and want to work remotely. That's sort of the statistics that's what's bringing to us, that says that they're going to want to do that. They're going to want to keep working remotely for small and medium businesses. It's gotten a lot easier to give remote access to people and give them the workloads, give them the tools to work remotely. The challenge comes from ensuring that you're securing those workloads, those endpoints, those kind of assumptions that things aren't safe out there. So you're really focused on each person and kind of developing solutions to match those security needs as remote workers continue to work, and they continue to work. And I know at a couple gurus, that's really our focus, is making sure that we're developing a solution for you and your users, wherever they may be, and ensuring that you can continue to grow, keep working, and not have to focus on your information technology.